Good evening, everyone. Welcome to our webinar, part of the Kappa Gamma Lifestyle Learning Series on preparing for and answering the hard questions. This is all about interviewing. My name is Audrey Kugler, and I'm really excited to have a pretty great list of attendees today. I'm going to go through some logistics really quick for those of you who may or may not be well-versed in GoToMeeting. On your computer, if you've logged in, you'll have a dashboard on the side. Really the main things for this particular webinar that are going to be good for you to know are the hand raise function and the chat function. So I don't have any polls or questions or handouts or anything as part of this. So those are the two things you're going to want to be able to kind of utilize and understand. So as a start, if everybody can go over to your dashboard, and I have everyone muted right now. I do that on purpose, otherwise sometimes there's a lot of ancillary background noise and it gets really distracting. To start, if everyone could go to your dashboard and raise your hand. So click the raise hand button just to kind of see if you can get that working. This is a really great way, fantastic, you guys. It's a really, really great way to get my attention during the webinar. I will check that dashboard constantly as we're going through. And if you do have a question, because I do have everyone muted, feel free to raise your hand. So use that button to raise your hand, and like I said, I'll check it, and if I see that there's a hand raise, I'll ask that person if they have a question and let them unmute so that they can ask their question. The other function is the chat function down at the bottom. Same kind of thing. If you do have a question or you want to make sure that I'm going to follow up on something, feel free to ask it in that if you're not comfortable talking over the phone via the webinar. That's another a good way to get my attention throughout the webinar. So I produced numerous webinars for Kappa as well as professionally. So I like to toggle back and forth between the webinar and the actual dashboard. So again, if you have any questions, that's really the best way to get my attention. And I'll be checking it periodically throughout the time we're here. So we'll go ahead and get started. We have about an hour. I'm not sure that we'll take that in time, but I do want to make sure I cover everything with you. First off, I want to send a thank you to Kappa Gamma. This program is brought to you by the Kappa Trainer Program through Kappa, and that's through the foundation. So that's all nonprofit the money goes towards education for our members, as well as the Kappa Gamma foundational groups that support Kappas. And so this is a really great program. So a couple things about myself. So why am I doing this? Why do I feel like I have any expertise in it? Why do I feel like I can present this information to you? A little bit of background on me. I was initiated in 1999 at Epsilon Kappa in Columbia, Carolina. I've been a Kappa trainer for about 4 years. And my background is in operations and human resources. I'm currently a human resources manager for a Fortune 500 company, so I do a lot of interviewing. And I've previously worked in graduate school management and career services, so I have a lot of background assisting with job placement, interviewing, training, etc. And I think I've got a question really quick from somebody, so we're going to test this. Woohoo! EK! Yep, so thanks for that. See, I told you guys I would toggle back and forth and let you ask questions. Thank you, Amalia. Yes, I'm very excited. I'm an EK. So I'm here in Columbia. That's kind of my professional background. I have a Master of Human Resources and an MBA. So I have quite a lot of background in this. I'm not going to say I'm the all-knowing, all-encompassing, etc. But I do love this part of it. I'm one of those weird people that really actually likes interviewing. So I try to take the fun out of it. So I'm going to go through this again. Feel free to interject with questions. Feel free to ask me and raise your hand, anything like that. If you do have technical problems, I'll see what I can do to help. I'm not very good with those, but I will try my hardest. But otherwise, feel free to interject. So when I looked at the plan for this, I was thinking, the people on this webinar, you might be 18 years old and trying to land an internship or your first real job. You may be 60 years old and hoping that you can make a career change. But being prepared for an interview and having solid interview skills are really essential to helping anyone land that next job. And I thought about it when I was going through the agenda and going through the responses I had on the registration. Some of you specifically signed up just for that. But then there were a lot of people who asked about some of the general interview tips. So what you see in bold here, that's the interview piece that I really want to cover. But I am going to go over some just general interview tips as well, just to kind of go through some things that are, helpful things to know about to get you through a typical interview. So to start, we're going to talk a little bit about the first impression. This is really important, happens in terms of a first impression when you're going to interview. So these are just some simple basics to help make sure that you're putting your best foot forward at all times. It's funny because you don't think about this particular piece all the time. You want to dress nicely and you want to look the part, but over 50% of an interview is visual. That's personal appearance, but it's also hand gestures, facial expressions, how you act with people. There's so much about it that's visual. So it's really important that, honestly, if you're ever in doubt, err on the side of conservative. And this is really based on research, and I'll tell you again from an HR perspective, there's a lot that comes with the visual, and it's really hard to be extremely objective all the time, and sometimes those physical appearance and things like that tell you a lot about a person, and so it is a huge part of an interview. So in terms of what to wear, recommendations would be a dark conservative business suit. Cover your visible tattoos. A lot of companies at this point have no problem with visible tattoos. In fact, the company I work for, it's completely okay to have one. But for an interview purpose, I would say cover any visible tattoos that you have. Be really careful with perfume. You don't know what kind of sensitivities anyone has in the workplace. Somebody may have an allergy or something, and sometimes perfume can just be overwhelming. You don't know how small of a space you're going to be in. So be really careful with perfume. I would say, again, err on the side of conservative and don't wear any, or if you have to wear just, one spray instead of 3. Take a leather portfolio or something similar to keep your resume in a notepad for questions. Try not to carry anything else. If you have to, carry just a small conservative purse for women. I know I have a huge purse, and I have to remind myself anytime I go into an interview situation not to take that with me. Do not take a book bag. Do not take a backpack. Try to avoid that if you have to. Take like a over-the-shoulder messenger bag or something, or a laptop bag if that's the case, if you're flying in or something like that. Some little things to think about: sit up straight while you're waiting in the reception area. Do not play on your phone. It looks a lot better if you're just sitting there ready to go. It's actually kind of a frustration, I'll be honest, when I walk in to go pick somebody up for an interview and they're on their phone typing or texting or whatever. And it's just, that's the world we live in, I know that, but it definitely gives a different visual appearance of yourself if you don't have your phone out. If you're just ready to go, prepped, sitting up straight, if there is literature, feel free to browse it. There's nothing wrong with that. When you see the person coming in to get you for the interview, stand up when you see them coming, smile, introduce yourself, and give them a handshake. And I'm actually going to give a little bit of advice on this, the handshake. There is a wrong way and a right way to shake a hand, and you should actually practice so that you're ready for this. And unfortunately, women tend to be the worst at handshakes. And I had somebody teach me how to do it, so it's not uncommon. So this is the wrong way. We, from an HR perspective, call this the fish handshake. And if you're going to shake someone's hand and you have a really strong handshake or you have a very professional one, this is very uncomfortable. Do not shake hands like this. It's just very uncomfortable. The right way to shake a hand is actually to have, we call it web to web. The web of your hand is between your thumb and forefinger. Make sure that they touch the other person's web of their hand and just shake a couple of times with, a decent amount of force. Don't break any fingers or anything like that. The handshake is actually a really big part, and a lot of people will judge you and rank you based on a handshake. So definitely practice that and smile. Smiling will get you so far. It says a lot about the positive side of your personality. So in terms of the first impression, and this is part of the interview, but this is also a first impression, because you may only have 5 minutes with some people. So you want to have a prepped and ready elevator speech, and this is kind of at all times. And this is the tell me about yourself. Everybody gets that question. Oh, tell me a little about yourself. So in terms of elevator speech, there's a couple of pieces to it. The first piece is when you're thinking about it, you want to identify your goals. So this isn't necessarily part of your speech, but you want to know what the point is. So why am I telling someone? You want it to be simple, you want it to be engaging, and it's just a really simple way to get the conversation started about you. The second piece is to explain what you do. So what do you want them to immediately know about you or remember about you? What is your value? And you want to be excited about this. This is what you want them to know. So an example of this is if I were to say, what do I do? I'm a human resources manager and I have been for 3 years. That's not really memorable. So a better option would be, I'm a human resources manager with both my Master of Human Resources and my MBA supporting over 200 employees, and I have experience supporting over half of the country and a total of 600 employees. It's a lot more interesting and it shows a lot more value than just saying, I'm a human resources manager and have been for 3 years. So that's an example of explaining what you do. The second piece is the unique selling proposition. So this is what makes you unique. Why are you so great? What makes you, your organization, your idea, what is it about you that's so great? So, for example, if I were to continue, mine would say, my organizational and operational background helped me to be a stronger and more engaged business partner with the operations and finance leaders of the business in which I work. I'm able to make a strong impact to the P&L as well as employee morale and culture because of my diverse background and experience. So it builds on that. It builds on what do I have, what's my background. And then putting it all together. So the idea is that you want to do these two. Explain what you do, unique selling proposition, what's the point of what you're going to say, and put it all together and then practice it. And really you want it to be about 20 to 30 seconds. Your elevator speech is very short. It's really just, like I said, that concise intro to get you going. So, for example, if I put mine together, mine would say something like this. Hi, I'm Audrey. I'm a Human Resources Manager with both my Master of Human Resources and my MBA supporting over 200 employees, and I have experience supporting over half the country and a total of 600 employees. My organizational and operational background helped me to be a stronger and more engaged business partner with the operations and finance leaders of the businesses in which I work. I am able to make a strong impact to the P&L as well as employee morale and culture because of my diverse background and experience. Mine's about 27 seconds. I could probably pare it down if I took out some adjectives. But that's an example of an elevator speech. So, like anything else, practice makes perfect. So you want to try it. You want to practice it. You want to practice on your friends, practice on your coworkers, practice on your the career center, anywhere you can practice. You want it to be really natural and you want it to flow. And then the other piece to it is how do you then go into the next steps? You go into an interview and typically we'll say, tell me a little about yourself or tell me a little bit about your resume. And this is how you build into it. So you start with your elevator speech and then you say, if you review my resume, you can see that in my current role, I am over the 200 employees. And this is what I've done in that role to build my organizational impact. So you can build off of that elevator speech as you go through that particular, intro to yourself, tell me about your resume kind of thing. Oops, sorry, I did not click the right place. My apologies. So, what everybody came for today, the interview. I really do think I'm the only person on this entire planet that enjoys interviewing. And I'm pretty sure of that, but I do. I think it's a really great thing. This is, like I said, the crux of this entire webinar. And I'm going to talk through the types of interviews you may go through, the main topics, how to answer those hard interview questions, how to ask questions in an interview. So that's what we're going to cover here. So in terms of types of interviews, you could come across probably 4 main types. You may experience one of them, you may experience more. You'll probably have to go through several different interviews for any role in which you're interviewing, so you may have kind of a combination of all of these. So the first type is typically a phone interview. A company has these because they have a large pool of candidates and they want to narrow the field. That's the simplicity of what a phone interview is for. They typically last 20 to 30. Mine commonly will only last 15, so don't take it personally as it takes less time. They may just call completely unscheduled, and if they do, it is absolutely okay to say, I'm really sorry, this isn't a good time. Can we schedule a time for me to call you back later? They know that they are calling you off their schedule, and it is absolutely okay to say that you don't have time at that point. Just say it really professionally and make sure to schedule a time for later. In terms of panel interviews, these are probably the most intimidating for you, but the most efficient for employers. So you will see it a lot. It is sometimes hard to get 3 or 4 people with all their different schedules aligned for one day if you were coming in. So don't be shocked if you see these, and just consider it 3 or 4 one-on-one interviews at one time. But they can be a little intimidating. It's typically 3 to 5 people. You won't often see more than that. And the hardest part is to build rapport with everyone. So making eye contact with each interviewer, smiling at everyone, making sure that you ask everyone questions. Again, going back to practice makes perfect. This is another one of those. The more you practice this, the more you will feel more comfortable with it. Another type of interview that you may go on or have is a lunch or dinner interview. These are typically completely unstructured. There's not necessarily a, hey, tell me about yourself, let's walk through your resume kind of thing. They're really evaluating your social skills, your etiquette, and your manners. So a couple of tidbits for this: be polite. Be as polite as you possibly can to the wait staff. Even if your dinner comes back wrong or you've got hair in your plate, that's fine as long as you handle it really politely. Pick a meal that's somewhere in the mid-range of prices. Don't be cheap and don't pick the lobster. And do not, under any circumstances, I don't care if they're drinking, do you drink alcohol? Then I would say that 99.9% of the time, you don't drink alcohol in an interview. Sometimes they actually do that to test you, where they will drink alcohol and then say, well, did you want a wine or anything? You can easily get out of it with, no, I'm sorry, I'm driving, or, I'd really prefer not to. I want to make sure I'm putting my best foot forward for you. If they're really pressuring you and you feel like that you have to, feel free to order one. That's that 0.1%. I would say, seriously though, I would say no. But if you do feel like there's a lot of pressure and they keep asking, you're starting to feel like it's rude not to, order one and sip on it through the entire dinner. This is actually a really big deal. They really are testing that, and I've been on interviews where that's actually a test as part of it to see if you would consume quite a bit of alcohol and drive, or if you weren't able to handle that. The next type is a one-on-one. These are the most traditional, the most common. This is really what you see most of the time. And even a phone interview is typically one-on-one. So interviewing. This is the most common type of interview. It's called behavioral-based interviewing. You may have heard of it, and you may not know what it means. So that's what I'm going to talk about, because I would say 99% of interviewers are going to use this kind of interviewing. And if you know what it is, you'll know how to answer it. So what is it? Basically, a candidate is asked to give examples of how they performed or behaved in a past certain job-related situation. The theory is basically this, that your behavior doesn't really change. By the time you're 18, 20, 25, your behavior doesn't change. You are the person you're going to be. You typically behave the same way. Past behavior is the best indicator of future behavior. It's the best way for an employer to know how you're going to handle a situation. These are the types of questions you would see in that. It would be, tell me about a time when you dealt with an angry customer. Describe a situation when you had to do many things at once. Give me an example of a time when you had to work long hours or put in the extra effort. So this is very, very typical at this time in the cultural environment we're in. Like I said, about 99% of the time, these are the questions you're getting. And if these aren't the types of questions, the way you're going to answer them is the same way. So we're going to go through that too. The questions they ask basically depend on what we call core competencies. So we look at a job and say, what are the key skills or abilities that are essential for someone to be successful in this particular job? Or what are the core duties? And then we form questions based on those. So they're different for every single job. But the key is to remember that they want to know your past behavior and they want an example, not a hypothetical. So again, I'm going to go through some how-to on this. So how do you prepare? the best way to prepare for this kind of interview or this type of interviewing is to, before you even get ready for one particular interview, this is kind of all-encompassing, go through your resume. And when you go through your resume, pull out, or your past or your history, pull out 6 to 7 things that you've done, accomplished, managed, things you're really proud of, and write them down in detail from start to finish. Every single detail you can possibly think of. And I'm going to go through the method for doing this in a second. Typically, if you have 6 to 7 really solid examples, you can use those throughout any interview for any kind of competency. And you'll see what I mean as we go through this. It's a method called the CARS method. That's kind of an anagram to remember it. There's a second way to do this as well. So kind of maybe the first step is to do this in general. You have it ready to go at all times. The second one is to look specifically at the job description that's listed. So this is actually, I pulled this from Indeed.com, from a job that I found on Indeed.com. And these are listed as the job skills and abilities needed. That's typically what they're listed under. So think of 2 to 3 examples of times in which you've used these kinds of things. And then when you ask, you'll have examples ready. So, for example, for the strong customer service skills, the question they may ask may be, tell me about a time when you dealt with a difficult customer. For handling high stress, it could be something as simple as describe how you manage a high stress situation. But then for strong human relations and organizational skills, the question may be something like, how do you build and maintain a professional network? So they can take these, and you won't necessarily know what the questions are going to be, obviously. But if you really, built those 6 to 7 really good answers, you can look at these and be like, oh, okay, well, this one thing talks about how I built relationships, it talks about my communication skills, and it talks about my judgment. So I can use that for any of those. And just making sure that you kind of have an answer that covers all of them will really get you prepped and ready for that interview. So the CARS method, maybe some of you may have heard of this, some have different anagrams for it, but this is the step-by-step how-to on how to prep your answers. So basically the CARS method, when I told you to kind of go through and do all the details, this is the next step. So I recommend that you literally do this on paper. So anytime I would have people come in and help them prep for interviews, I would have them write down in all of these pieces in detail, and then we start sort of softening it and working through what that looks like as an answer. So the first is C. This is the circumstance, the background information. This is where you give them enough detail to understand what the situation is, what the background is, but you want to keep it as simple as possible. They don't need to know everything. They just need to know enough to understand all the rest of it. This is kind of the hardest part because you want to tell them everything and you really don't have time. You want to focus on the big pieces, and the big pieces are the action. So what did you do? So there's a situation or a circumstance, and there's an action. This is a huge chunk of the answer because this is what you did. And again, past behavior predicting future behavior. They want to know what you did. The next piece is the result. So what happened? So there was a circumstance, X, Y, and Z happened, and I did this. And because I did this, this is what happened as a result. The last part of it is the hardest part, and this is the sell. This is the why does this matter? So what? And the reason this is hard and why people struggle is because it's really hard to talk about why you're off, why you have this competency, and how you showed it. It's hard to sell yourself. Not many people are very good at it. And ultimately, by the time you get done with a question, your answer should really last about 2 to 3 minutes. Again, you want it to be specific, detailed, short, and on topic. And don't stress. I'm going to go through my own example on this so we can talk through what that looks like. So here's an example. Tell me about a time when you made a mistake and you had to correct it. Nobody likes this one because the hard part is you're basically saying, oh my gosh, I messed up. And that's okay. But again, if you have enough examples written down, then you'll be prepped and ready and you'll be able to handle it. So we'll go through these. So the first one is The circumstance, the background information. So for a circumstance, this would be my answer. When I worked at Enterprise Rent-A-Car, I managed the commercial truck repairs. Each truck had to have identification numbers, one for the cab and one for the large box on the back. And when replacing the box for major damage, it's important to verify the identification number to ensure you're ordering the correct item, as these typically cost about $35,000 and take approximately 2 months to build. Unfortunately, in one instance, I did not accurately verify that information, and the truck sat for 2 months losing revenue. And when the new box came in, it was the wrong size and it did not fit. So in this case, I've given enough details to understand the situation. They have enough background. They don't need to know what type of truck it is. They don't need to know all the specific details about it, what color it was, where I ordered it from, how long ago it was. They don't need to know any of that. They just need to know the basic details. So for action, what did I do? I immediately checked with the vendor to verify the identification numbers and determine where the mistake was. Once I determined that it was my oversight, I started reaching out to the other truck repair departments in the country to see if anyone needed one matching the one that I have. I was able to find a location in North Carolina who did have a need for this box. I concurrently contacted the manufacturer and requested another box of the correct size, and I did the cost-benefit analysis on expediting it. It was in our favor to pay the expediting due to losing more time. I then approached my manager, explained the situation and my solutions, and received his approval. So this is where I take kind of a negative. How did I mess up? And I spun it as positively as I could. This is what I did, okay? And sometimes the action and the result will kind of blend in together because they kind of go hand in hand, and that's okay. So the result, what happened? So I gave the background, I said, here's what I did, and then here's the result. The North Carolina team purchased our unusable box for the total cost of $35,000 and then paid for the shipping, which they would have had to have paid had they ordered it through the manufacturer anyway, but this time they didn't have to wait for the manufacturer, so it ultimately saved them 2 months of downtime. I expedited the manufacturing of the new box to us. We sat on the truck for another 2 weeks before it was back in service. I then reviewed our computer and photo process for claims, and I instituted a standard operating procedure to ensure that myself and others would not make the same kind of mistake again, and that was actually pushed out at the corporate level. So this is great because it's what happened. It's the conclusion, it's the solution, it's showing how I took something that I messed up on and I made it as good as it could possibly be, accepting the fact that I still made a mistake. And the sell. So why does this matter? Again, this is always the hardest part, the kind of closure of the question. I was able to accept my mistake, but also find a viable and cost-saving solution to the problem before I burdened my manager with it. When I went to him, it was with the solution, not just the problem. While the mistake cost the company money, it was only the extra downtime for repairs and the expedited manufacturing, and not the entire cost for the box, as I was able to find a way for that to be utilized. This shows that I am able to solve problems, think on my feet, and ultimately claim not only my own mistakes, but fix those mistakes as well. Like I said, this sell is really hard, but it's basically, what did I learn? How am I better? How did I improve because of it? And what skills am I showing? I'm showing problem solving, thinking on my feet, claiming my own mistakes and fixing them. Those are all really great positives that came out of that. So again, really being able to take an instance from your resume or something that you've done in your background and say, okay, I'm gonna write down all the details of this and go through the CARS method for it, the circumstance, the action, the result, and the sell, and really break that down into a good answer. And so the cool thing about this that I really like is that basically I can use this example to answer any kind of question. So this particular example could answer the tell me about a time you made a mistake and had to correct it. But it could also answer tell me about a time you had to think quickly, about a time I had to solve a problem, about a time I was not able to meet customer expectations, about a time where I had to find a cost-saving initiative. There's so many different answers or questions that I could answer with this one example. So I go back to, I said it's really good if you have 6 to 7 really solid examples. And this is why, because you can use them for a plethora of questions, because it's not just one competency. I'm showing numerous competencies within this one question. And by the way, yes, this webinar will be available, and if anybody does want the presentation, I'll be happy to send it, because I know that this is a lot of information. And if you're furiously writing, don't stress, I can send this to you. So, as I click the wrong button again, general interview tips. And so these are kind of hard. So the first one is really, if you don't know how to answer a question or immediately have a response, it is absolutely okay to say, that is a great question. Let me think about that for a moment. Pause, gather your thoughts, and respond. There is not a thing wrong with that, because sometimes you really have to think about, okay, I have these 7 great examples, and they want to ask me about solving a problem, and I have a couple, but I'm not sure which one's the best fit. Or, you know, I answered the last interviewer's question with that one. Let me think through something else I might have in my pocket that I can pull out for this one. So that's okay. And we know that interviewing is very stressful for the interviewee. So feel free to take your time, pause, and respond. You can also ask to come back to a question. There is nothing wrong with that. To say, you know, I really want to think about that. I want to give you the right answer. Can we come back to that question at the end of the interview? There is not a problem with that, really. I think a lot of people get very hung up on thinking, wait, I can't say that, I can't say that. You can absolutely say that. And you're welcome. Somebody said thanks for sharing, saying that you'll share the information. That is not a problem at all. I told you guys I check the question panes occasionally. Another tip is don't make up an answer under any circumstances. Interviewers know and recruiters know, because we interview a lot of people. I would say on average for one job I might interview a total of 20 people for one job. And if I'm hiring for 10 jobs, that's 200. So there's a lot. We interview a lot of people. We know when someone's making up an answer. And there are no circumstances do you make up an answer. It is okay to say, you know, I don't have a really good answer for that, but let me tell you what I would do, and try to give you an example that fits within that at least slightly. That is okay. I would rather have somebody say, you know, no, I have never dealt with customers, but I have dealt with relationships. So let me tell you about a time when I wasn't able to build a relationship, or something like that. Anything that you can think of that might be a viable example, or you can offer a hypothetical, and then you can offer an example that's at least similar to it, but never make up an answer. The other piece to this is all experience matters. So students and then adults who haven't worked in quite some time tend to complain that interviewers ask about their experience, but then they say, but I don't have any. You probably have so much more experience than you realize. It may not be job related, and that's okay. So you may be interviewing for a job in sales, and you may not have sales experience, but there are things that you have done in school or in your personal life that have given you valuable and relevant experience. So it doesn't matter if you were paid at a job to do something where you gained the experience. They just want to know that you did something relevant and that you did it well. So think about things that you gained experience in. So internships, student or society organizations, any sort of leadership role you've ever had, classroom projects, team projects, athletic participation, volunteer work, any of these things are considered relevant experience. And I have had a lot of people who have come to me and said, you know, I don't have a job experience with that, but let me tell you what I did when I was on the volleyball team. Or let me tell you what I did when I was in CHAPA. So those things, you know, and I've had people come back to the workforce and say, you know, I don't have an example of that exactly, but, you know, I worked at the Homeowners Association for my development, and this was an issue that we had that I dealt with. Or, you know, I volunteer with the Junior League, and this is something that I do. So there's definitely ways to utilize your experience. So next, I'm going to talk about the dreaded question. And everybody hates this question. Everyone. I don't know anybody who likes this question. And you're probably going to get asked it, because we love to ask it, It is my favorite question to ask because number one, I know that people don't like it. And number two, most people don't know how to answer it. So I would say you need to prep this one and you need to prep it really well. So I'm going to tell you how to do that because I know that you don't want to because it's terrible and everybody hates this question. So when you're looking at your strengths, you want to be true and you want to be honest. You need to really think about yourself and what are your genuine strengths. If you're not sure, feel free to ask people, what do you think I'm good at? What are the things that I'm best at? You want them to be relevant to the job. So for example, I'm really good at presenting, or I think I am. Y'all might at me and say, no, Audrey, actually you're not, but I think it's a strength. And if I was interviewing for a job where I was going to be typing all day, I wouldn't utilize that because that doesn't have any relevance to the job. So I want to think through and have a couple of strengths kind of in my back pocket that either work for most jobs or that I know are relevant to the field in which I'm going in. And again, give examples. So don't just say, my greatest strength is my ability to build relationships. You want to go through that whole CARS method. My biggest strength is my ability to build relationships. Let me tell you about a time when blah, blah, blah happened, and I did this, and this shows that I am really good at building relationships because you really, again, they really like that past behavior, predicts future behavior. That's really important. And so use that throughout the whole thing. The same thing goes with weaknesses. So you want to be true and you want to be honest. This is where it's the trick, preferably not related to the job. So if you are, example, interviewing for a typing job and you're really bad at presenting, that's a great time to say, you know what, presenting is really not my forte. I get really nervous about it. You know, for example, I was doing a presentation in school and, you know, X, Y, and Z happened. We always want to spin it as positively as possible. So to improve upon this, you know, I'm practiced, I'm joining Toastmasters, I've done X, Y, and Z because I want to get better at this. So it's totally okay to spin it positively, and you absolutely want to give an example of what you're doing to improve. So to give you an example of my greatest weakness, so when I answer this question, my greatest weakness is that I'm too much of a yes person. So for example, you know, especially around the holidays when there's a lot of volunteer organizations that I work with, they all ask for my time and they all want my time, and I want to say yes to all of them. And, you know, one year I said yes to all of them, but I was unable to keep my commitment to a couple of them. And as a result, they had to go ask for more volunteers, and I actually damaged my relationship to some degree with some of them, and I had to build that back up. And so in order to improve upon that, I keep a really detailed calendar. I don't commit until I've been able to review my calendar and assure myself that I really can give anyone asking for my time 100%. I just came up with that on a whim, so that wasn't actually my practice weakness. But that's an example of how to be true and honest. It's not related to you know, a typing job, for example. But I took a positive spin to it, and I gave an example of what I'm doing to improve upon. So you want to have two of each ready at all times. Two strengths, two weaknesses. Have them ready. Have them in your back pocket, ready to go. Same thing like with the CARS method. Have them detailed out. Have examples of those things. Really write them out and practice them. The other trick is respond immediately. Do not pause. We are all human. We all have weaknesses. We all have strengths, and that's completely okay. Don't be afraid to be proud of your strengths. Don't be afraid to be aware or own up to your weaknesses. Interviewers want to know that you're aware of these things, what you do to build them, what you do to improve upon them. And it actually looks really bad when a person has to think about themselves. So there's that moment where you say, hey, tell me, what would you say are your two biggest strengths? And somebody has to say, you know, I'm not really sure. Let me think about that. It's not a good impression because then we start to wonder, well, how do they not know what their strengths or weaknesses are? Shouldn't you just know that? So keep that in mind. Respond immediately. And it's okay, again, to own up. We're all human. We're all going to have strengths and weaknesses. So that's the dreaded question. The other part of interviewing that's actually really hard for people is then asking questions. So this is really important to the process. Interviewers will typically at the very end ask you, do you have any questions? And they really listen to your questions to understand more about you, about what's important to you, about what you've paid attention to, about what you've researched, what you know. And some things to keep in mind are the interview isn't just one-sided. Yes, you should have already researched it. You should already know that you're fairly interested in this particular company and this particular job, but you're also doing some fact-finding to ensure that this really is a place you want to work. So to some degree, you get to interview them. Now, this isn't, like crazy panel interview where you're firing questions away, but you should be able to ask positive questions and send positive vibes and get your message about what's important to you out to the interviewer, as well as within these questions, help them figure out what your strengths, career goals, and knowledge of their organization is. So again, these questions are really good too for building rapport with the interviewer, solidifying that relationship. Prior to going in, you should do some research on the board of directors, the financials of the company, the culture, the mission statement, anything like that. Anything you can know about the company so you can ask better questions, that's going to be very, very helpful for that. And you want to have these, you want to have about 3 to 4. Limit that to any of your interviews. If you know you're going in for, say, 5 one-on-ones in a day, so you should have a schedule that says, hey, you're going to have 5 one-on-ones, have 2 per person ready to go. And you may change who you ask that to depending on how the conversation's going, but have quite a few questions ready and prepare these in advance. Do not wing it. Have them written, and it's okay, again, to open that pad folio or open that notebook and say, I do have some questions. Do you mind if I go through them with you? Again, if you have a panel interview or more than one-on-one, have several questions prepared for each interviewer. And the cool thing is this is where you can ask things like, and I'll go through some examples of bad questions and good questions. So we'll go through the good. Tell me, if I start with this company, it's a potential with the company. Tell me, if I start with this company, what is my potential within 5 years? Where do people typically find themselves? If they're successful and they perform, what would my potential be? What is the long-range growth and expansion plans of the company? Something like, tell me something about the company culture. What is it typically like? I know your mission statement says X, Y, and Z, but how do you emulate that in the day-to-day? You can also ask about the interviewer's career. Hey, John, tell me, what has your career been like? Why did you start working here? What do you like working here? What is the culture like to you? That's, again, building that rapport with that particular interviewer. Some of the bad questions, and I would steer away from these if you can, are, what's the typical, what's the schedule like? Is this an 8 to 5? Is this a 8:30 to 5:30? Am I going to be able to get overtime? Do we have to work on the weekends? I would also steer away from turnover. Hey, why do people leave? What's the typical termination reason? What's your turnover rate? And how many sick days and vacation days do I get? Those are all really bad questions to ask because, again, they're using these questions to better understand you as a person and you as a professional, and those just leave kind of a sour taste about what's important to you. If you want this job and you want to work for this company, then those things should be a moot point, theoretically. I know they're not, but that's why those are weird questions. The exception I would say to this is if you're in your final interview, like absolutely final interview, and you say, I have some tactical questions to ask that I'm not really sure about and I wasn't able to find out in previous research. Can you tell me a little bit about what is a typical day in terms of schedules? If I were to take this job, what would be the expectations or what would a typical week look like in terms of, my schedule? I want to have a better idea of the more tactical pieces of this. And if you're with HR, if you interview with HR, especially if you're interviewing later on in the process, that's when you can ask about, I know I'm late in the process, I'm pretty far along, and I'm definitely interested in working here. I want to just understand a little bit more about some of the benefits here. Can you tell me about those? And from an HR perspective, benefits include include vacation, 6 days, 401k, health, medical, things like that. So you can ask that roundaboutly instead of saying, what's the schedule like? You can say, can you tell me a little bit about the benefits and what the days are like, things like that. That's okay to ask when you get way farther along in the interview process, and specifically if you're working with HR. HR is used to these kinds of questions. You get them all the time, and that's a really good thing to ask HR. But again, the best way to ask it would be, can you tell me a little bit about the benefits package so I have a better idea of what you offer to incoming employees? That's a really professional way to ask that same question. Do not ever bring up pay in an interview. If you have done your proper research, there shouldn't be any questions about pay, but oftentimes the interviewers, at least towards the end in the final interview, will offer questions about that. They will ask you, what are your expectations of pay? Sometimes that happens in a phone screen, and that's okay. Be honest, because if you're outside of their pay range, it's good for you both to know that. And if you're within their pay range, then they'll probably call you back for a second interview. So there shouldn't be a question about pay. But do not bring it up in an interview. That is definitely not a good way to go. Okay, so the last piece, so now that we've gone through the hard part, asking the questions, answering the questions, the follow-up and the closing is the last piece of this. So basically, it is completely okay and highly recommended that at any point in the interview process, you say, hey, what are the next steps? Can you tell me what I should expect? You can ask about timeline. You can ask about, when you should expect to hear back. That's completely okay. Ask for a business card from everyone with whom you interact. If they don't give you one, don't push for it, because some companies aren't actually allowed to do that. They aren't allowed to connect individually with people. But do what you can to find out the address and their full name, the location and the address. But ask for a business card if you can. Be enthusiastic. If you want it, tell them. You have to tell people you want the job, because sometimes they don't know. And especially for people who are a little introverted, it's kind of hard sometimes to be able to say, I don't know, I wasn't sure. So even if it's hard to say it, get in the habit. Yes, this is, I'm really excited about this. This is really great. I'm really excited about this opportunity. I would love to work for your company. I would love to have this job. I want this job. You can say all of those things. Close like you began, smile, keep eye contact, shake their hands, and then send a thank you card, preferably handwritten. A lot of people have gone to sending emails, and that's okay, but I still recommend a handwritten note. It actually gets you a lot farther than you think. There are people who have written me handwritten notes, and even if they didn't get that particular job, I remember them for future jobs. Thank everyone. Thank every single person, include everyone, the receptionist, the person in HR that set you up, everyone. And again, in the thank you card or the email or whatever, thank them for the interview, and then tell them you want it. It's all about telling them you want it, because they don't know unless you tell them. Some final tips: never, ever, ever be late. Most employers actually have a no tolerance policy for this, so I highly recommend that you're 15 minutes early. And if you're not sure where you're going, go the day before, or go the weekend before, so you know how to get there, where to park, where you're going, so there's no issues the day of. Be friendly and respectful to everyone. The receptionist, the janitor, anyone can be involved in the hiring process, and you don't know who they are. You don't know who you're running into in the bathroom. You don't know who you're running into getting coffee or water. You don't know. So be nice to every single person. Be persistent. Don't get frustrated if you don't get it. There are a lot of applicants for one job, so you won't win every time. But that's okay. If you're persistent and you keep going and stay positive, the right job will happen at the right time. And practice makes perfect. The more you do it, the better you get at it. Do mock interviews, grab your friends, grab your colleagues, practice, 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 practice. Practice your questions, practice your answers, practice as much as you can. And just stay positive, stay focused. You learn something every time you go through an interview, as hard as they are, and be prepared. Being prepared is really the best way to get through any interview process. So that is what I have for you guys today on how to interview and how to answer the hard questions. If anybody does have any questions, feel free to raise your hand on the dashboard, and I'll unmute you so you can ask. Or feel free to ask in the question or the chat pane. We'll give everyone a couple of minutes to see if there's any questions that come up. No questions at all. And this is my email address. Feel contact me. This is my personal email. I have no problem if anybody contacts me and has any follow-up questions about this whatsoever. I mean that. There's a reason I'm a CAPA trainer. I really do genuinely enjoy this piece of it. And I love interviewing and helping people prep for interviews and helping them find the right job and get the job. So really, I mean it. If you have questions, please feel free to ask them. Okay, so I have one question from Krista. So Krista, I'm going to unmute you. Hey, how are you?
Hi, I'm
Krista,
good.
you're
Thanks
unmuted.
for doing this.
Hi. Yeah, you're welcome. Thanks for attending.
Yeah, of course. My question is regarding interviews that you get from out of state. So I'm in Ohio. I'm applying for jobs in New York. But what is the expectation in terms of doing in-person interviews? Like, would I have to fly out to do that interview?
Typically, when you get to a final stage, the answer is yes. So they're very flexible with that. So I would say that in my experience, both as an interviewee and an interviewer, they totally understand that you have a life, you may have kids, they don't ask those questions, but they'll understand that you have those things. And they'll say, we want to fly you out. What day may work for you? How can we coordinate this with you? And if you basically say, if the answer is no, I can't do it, or if it's too far in advance for them and they want to do it earlier, they may do webinar-style interviews or Skype-style interviews. But ultimately, the etiquette is if you've gotten that far in the interview process and they want to bring you out, number one, they should pay for it. Under no circumstances should you pay to fly yourself out. They have your contact information. They know where you live. If they're that interested in you, they should pay for you to come out there. And the best thing I can say, best etiquette, is try to work it out as best you can. But most people are pretty flexible. They understand that they may have current jobs, you have lives. You can't necessarily get on a plane the next morning and fly to New York. Did that answer your question?
Thank you so much. I really appreciate that. Yes, it definitely does.
Okay, great. Awesome. All right, thanks, Krista. All right, we'll see who else we have questions from. Oh, and thank you, Amy. Amy told me that I'm a good presenter, so apparently I do know my own strengths. So thanks, I appreciate that. All right, any other questions for me? Okay, you guys have my contact information. If you want a copy of this webinar or this particular presentation, it has all my notes and stuff in it. I type all my notes on mine, even though I don't actually use them whenever I speak. Feel free to email me and let me know. I'll send you a copy, no problem. And this is also going to be posted on the CAPA website, so people can actually review it after this. So thank you to all of you for attending. I hope that you gained some glimmer of help or inspiration or assistance with interviewing. And good luck, and let me know if I can ever help at all. Oh, I have one more question. Maybe. Oh, thank you, all of you. I appreciate it. Y'all are great. And have a great night. Thank you so much.